Welcome to another St. Patrick's Day card watercolor tutorial, everybody. We're going to be painting this really fun St. Patrick's Day card today. As you can see, I've already sketched out my shamrocks or my clovers, so you can definitely pause the video and do the same. If you don't want to freehand it, you are definitely welcome to freehand it. Sometimes it ends up looking better, but if not, just pause the video and just trace out some random shamrocks. And the easiest way to draw them is to draw 3 hearts that all meet in the center, or almost meet in the center. So there's one heart, there's a second heart, and there's a third heart. Once you have that all laid out, you can go ahead and grab your watercolors. So of course we're going to be using green. And I'm just going to start out with my biggest shamrocks here. You can see that some of my shamrocks or my clovers, last year I offended somebody because I called a clover a shamrock or vice versa, which is why I am saying both of them. So please don't be offended if you're Irish. But yeah, whatever you want it to be, a shamrock, a clover, a green heart, just paint whatever your heart desires. And sorry, as I was saying, I got distracted there. But some of my clovers or shamrocks are overlapping, and this is because we are also going to be overlapping when painting them. And we're painting the biggest ones first because it's much easier to overlap smaller ones onto bigger ones. So just keep in mind when you're painting your bigger ones that you don't make them too dark, because we do want our smaller ones to actually show through when we paint them. By the way, I am using probably one of the worst watercolor pieces of paper you can use. I don't know what the brand is because I had this left over from a watercolor pad that I've had for a very long time. And because this is not a design that requires really good blending, or requires paper that can take a lot of watercolor or that can take blending, I decided just to use it up for a card tutorial. But you can see that my brush strokes, as soon as I paint one line on, it really shows on the paper, even when you paint over it again. And that's when you know you've got some really poor quality paper. Which is not to say that you can't paint on it, because that's how I learned watercolor painting. I had, honestly, some of the worst supplies that you could possibly have. And I still learned, so use whatever you have available. Okay, so my main clovers are complete. I'm gonna let these dry before we move on to the next step. Okay, our card is completely dry now, so I'm going to take a slightly smaller brush. I'm using my size 8 by Grumbacher. This size doesn't really matter, you just kind of work with what you're comfortable with. But now I'm just taking the same colors of green that I had before. I'm just mixing them so that they're quite pigmented, because we want them to show over top of the clovers that we've already painted. And we're just going to do the exact same thing and paint in those clovers so that they're slightly overlapping the ones that we already painted. See, the paintbrush that I started using here is a little bit too big. It's also quite worn. I've used it for a couple of years now, so the end isn't as fine, so it's not as easy to get some good detail work in. So a little trick is that if you have a detail brush, you can just kind of do the outlines and then take your bigger brush and fill it in. And you might ask, well, why don't you just do the whole thing with the detail brush? You definitely could. The only thing is that the bigger the brush, the more pigment it holds. So it's much easier to fill in the heart, and especially when you have the not so great quality paper that I have here, you really want to fill in your heart quite quickly so that you don't see these sort of blotchy brush marks or brush strokes. Okay, once you have your clovers painted, you can pencil in your holiday greeting. So I just wrote Happy St. Patty's Day, and you can go over that with a fine tip marker, black pen, whatever you have laying around. And the reason why I went over it in pencil first is because you're always bound to make a mistake. I know I've spelled things incorrectly because when I'm trying to focus on the lettering, I don't really think about how to spell a word. I don't really concentrate on that as much. So definitely pencil in, even if you're confident with the fact that you won't make a spelling mistake. It's sometimes you just draw a letter on a little bit wonky, so why not be sure? So I wrote that in. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to outline a couple of my shamrocks or my clovers, and I'm doing this sort of in a cartoony way, and by that I mean I'm not completely following the correct outline. And there we go. That's our St. Patrick's Day card. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. Don't forget to subscribe, like this video, and check out some of my other St. Patrick's Day tutorials if you enjoy this style of painting and card. Thanks and have an awesome week.